before the pyramids pierced the skies of Egypt, before the bronze walls of Benin gleamed in the sunlight, and before the great warriors of the Zulu sang their chants of power, there was Africa. A land where gods walked with men, where spirits guided kings, and where every river, every mountain, and every tree carried a voice. This is the story of how ancient African civilizations were born, and how their beliefs, gods, and spiritual systems shaped the world as they knew it. Every civilization begins with a story of creation. And in Africa, these stories were not just tales. They were blueprints for life, society, and kingship. The Yoruba of West Africa speak of the high god Olajime, who sent his emissary Obatala down from the heavens. With a snail shell filled with sand, and a rooster to scatter it, the earth was formed. Where Obatala stepped, mountains rose. Where the rooster scratched, valleys sank. In this myth, creation itself is not an accident, it is a deliberate act of order. The Yoruba believed that every human carried a fragment of that divine essence, known as Ori, the spiritual head. Now, travel north to the Nile Valley. The ancient Egyptians told of Nun, the endless waters of chaos. From this void rose Atum, the first god, who created Shu, the air, and Tefnut, the moisture. From them came Jeb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. Their children were Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, the gods who shaped Egypt's destiny. And far away, in the deserts of Mali, the Dogon people told a story of the star Sirius. They believed that life came from the Numo, amphibious being sent by the Creator to bring order and knowledge. Modern science would later marvel at the Dogon's astronomical wisdom, knowledge of star systems invisible to the naked eye. These stories may sound different, but they all share one truth. Africans believed the universe was alive, woven together by gods, ancestors, and spirits. To the ancient African, the world was not dead matter. The river was not just water, it was Oshun, goddess of fertility. The thunder was not just sound, it was Shango, lord of lightning. The sun was not just light, it was Ra, giver of life. This worldview created civilizations where every act of life, farming, fishing, hunting, building, was also an act of worship. When the ancient Egyptians farmed the Nile, they honored Hapi, the god of the river's flooding. When the Akan of Ghana tilled their soil, they poured libations to Asasiye, the earth mother. When the Zulu warriors marched, they called on the spirits of their ancestors to march with them. Nothing was ordinary. Life was sacred. And because life was sacred, order was necessary. From these beliefs, Africa's first civilizations rose. Egypt, often called Kemet, was not just a kingdom of pharaohs and pyramids. It was a sacred theater, where the king was seen as a god on earth. The rituals in temples were not mere ceremonies, they were cosmic dramas to keep balance in the universe, the principle of Ma'at. Further west, in the kingdom of Kush, priests of Amun wielded power equal to kings. They declared who could sit on the throne. In their temples, chants and offerings were believed to sustain the entire nation. In Nigeria, the ancient city of Ife became a spiritual capital. Its bronze heads, still admired today, were not just art, they were sacred images of kings believed to embody divine power. And in the forests of Central Africa, the Bakongo people used the Daikno, a sacred cosmogram, to guide their lives. It was a cross within a circle, symbolizing the journey of the soul from birth to death, and into the realm of the ancestors. Civilization in Africa was not just about walls, weapons, or wealth. It was about the balance between the seen and the unseen. But how were these beliefs preserved? Unlike other regions that wrote on parchment or clay, many African civilizations relied on the spoken word. The griots of Mali memorized centuries of history, kings, and battles, passing them on through song and story. A griot could tell you the lineage of a king for 20 generations. A griot could make the past live again with a single drumbeat. These oral traditions were not entertainment, they were living libraries. And in every story, the gods and ancestors played their part. Take for example the story of Sundiata Keita, the founder of the Mali Empire. His life was told as a prophecy, shaped by spirits, guided by destiny. The griots did not just tell history, they told it as myth, as divine order unfolding in human affairs. Through these traditions, African civilizations preserved their philosophies, values, and cosmic beliefs. To rule in Africa was not only to govern people. It was to be the bridge between the human and the divine. The pharaoh in Egypt was Horus in the flesh. His death was not the end, it was the continuation of the eternal cycle. The Oba of Benin was seen as a sacred ruler whose rituals maintained harmony between the living and the spirits. The Shilluk kings of Sudan were considered incarnations of Nikang, the divine founder of their people. Without spiritual legitimacy, there could be no true king. Because power did not flow from the sword alone, it flowed from the gods. So what do all these stories tell us? They tell us that ancient Africans did not separate the sacred from the ordinary. The cosmos, the earth, the ancestors, and the living were all part of a single, woven thread. To farm was to pray. To sing was to summon spirits. To rule was to embody the divine. And this belief, that the world itself was alive, shaped the birth of Africa's greatest civilizations. This is only the beginning of the journey. In part 2, we will enter the sacred spaces, the temples, the shrines, and the rituals. We will see how sacrifices, festivals, and ancestral worship kept kingdoms alive for centuries. Africa's gods are not forgotten. They live in the stories, the traditions, and the very heartbeat of the land. Stay tuned. In the ancient world of Africa, life was a ritual. Every sunrise was a blessing. Every meal was an offering. And every heartbeat echoed in rhythm with the gods. The civilizations of Africa did not just believe in the divine. They lived with it. They sang to it. They fed it with sacrifice, praise, and dance. This is the story of the worship systems of ancient Africa. The temples, shrines, and sacred rituals that bound kingdoms together and kept the bridge between humans and gods alive. Every civilization needs a place where the divine can be touched. For the ancient Africans, these were not just buildings, they were living spaces of spirit. In ancient Egypt, the temples of Karnak and Luxor stood as cosmic gateways. Priests did not serve the people there, they served the gods. The daily ritual was precise, washing the statue of the deity, clothing it, anointing it with oil, and offering food. To the Egyptians, if the god was not fed, the balance of the universe itself was at risk. In West Africa, sacred groves and shrines filled the forests. The Yoruba built shrines to gods like Shango and Oshan. At Oshan's grove in Azogbo, sacred trees and rivers became temples without walls, alive with offerings, carvings, and ritual objects. In the kingdom of Benin, altars to the ancestors stood in every palace. Bronze heads, ivory tusks, and carved figures were arranged to honor dead kings, believed to still guide the living. Across Central Africa, the Congo people used nkisi, sacred objects filled with spiritual force. Each nkisi was a shrine in itself, holding medicines, bones, or metals, believed to house a spirit that could heal, protect, or punish. Whether in stone temples, forest groves, or household altars, one truth remained. Africans believed the divine must dwell among the people. But who maintained these sacred places? Who spoke with the gods? In Egypt, the priesthood was a powerful class. They were astronomers, healers, and keepers of ritual. They determined the calendars, told the king when to plant, and guided the ceremonies that held the empire together. In West Africa, the Babalawo of the Yoruba interpreted the wisdom of Ifa, the sacred oracle. With palm nuts and divination trays, they sought answers from Orunmila, the deity of wisdom. Among the Zulu, the Sangoma listened to the ancestors through dreams, bones, and visions. They were healers, counselors, and spiritual protectors. The Igbo had the Dibia, wise men and women who mediated between Allah, the earth goddess, and the community. These spiritual specialists were not just priests. They were doctors, philosophers, and judges, guiding both the body and the soul. Nowhere did the African worldview become more visible than in ritual. Sacrifice was central, not always of blood, but of value. In Egypt, offerings of bread, beer, incense, and meat filled the temples. In Yoruba lands, goats, chickens, and kola nuts were given to the Orishas. Among the Akan, libations of palm wine were poured to the earth before any gathering. Sacrifice was never destruction, it was exchange. To give was to maintain balance. To feed the gods was to keep harmony alive. But ritual was not only about giving. It was about becoming part of the cosmic drama. Festivals filled the year. The festival of Opet in Thebes, where the god Amun's statue was carried through the city, uniting the people in joy. The New Yam festival of the Igbo, where the first harvest was dedicated to the gods before anyone could taste it. The Igungan masquerades of the Yoruba, where masked dancers became the ancestors themselves, walking again among the living. In these moments, the boundary between human and spirit dissolved. The gods were not distant. They were present, in the food, in the drum, in the mask, in the dance. If sacrifice was the food of the gods, then music was their breath. In Africa, music was not entertainment, it was a sacred force. The drum was a heartbeat of the universe. The chant was a spell that shaped reality. The dance was prayer made visible. Among the Yu of Ghana, the drum language could speak messages only the initiated could hear. Among the Yoruba, Bata drums called down Shango, the thunder god. Among the Zulu, war dances were invocations of ancestral strength. The instruments themselves were sacred. The balafon, the kora, the talking drum, all carried not just sound but spiritual vibration. Even today, African music shapes the world. Echoes of those ancient rituals can be felt in blues, jazz, reggae, gospel, and hip-hop. No worship system in Africa was complete without the ancestors. To the African, death was not an end, it was a transition. The dead remained part of the family, watching, guiding, protecting, and sometimes punishing. The Akan of Ghana poured libations before speaking, calling the ancestors to witness. The Shona of Zimbabwe believed their spirits, the Mondoro, lived in lions that guarded the land. The Maasai of Kenya spoke of their ancestors when blessing cattle and children. Every birth, every marriage, every harvest, every war began with a call to the ancestors. They were the eternal council, the invisible foundation on which society stood. This belief gave African communities strength. For if your ancestors walked with you, you were never truly alone. Ritual was not just for the people, it was the foundation of kingship. The Pharaoh of Egypt performed daily temple rites to sustain Ma'at, the cosmic order. The Oba of Benin made sacrifices at royal altars to ensure the fertility of the land. The Asantehene of Ghana presided over the Odwira festival, cleansing the state and uniting the people. Without ritual, kings lost legitimacy. Without sacrifice, kingdoms risked chaos. This is why African civilizations invested so much in their shrines, priests, and festivals, because politics itself was spiritual. But rituals were not always blessings. They could also be weapons. Curses were believed to bring drought, disease, or defeat in battle. Witchcraft, feared across the continent, was seen as the misuse of spiritual power. To counter this, communities relied on healers, diviners, and protective rituals. Masks, amulets, and charms were carried to shield against unseen harm. The spiritual world was powerful, but it demanded respect. In Africa, to live was to worship. The temples, shrines, and rituals were not just symbols of faith, they were the very heartbeat of civilization. Every dance was a prayer. Every drumbeat was a message. Every offering was a covenant between humans and gods. This was the soul of Africa's worship systems. A living tapestry of belief, woven into every sunrise and every season. But what happened when kings rose and empires expanded? How did these beliefs shape kingdoms as vast as Mali, Benin, and Ethiopia? And how did colonization attempt to silence them? For thousands of years, Africa's gods were alive. They spoke in the thunder. They danced in the drum. They walked in the masks of the ancestors. But time does not stand still. Kingdoms rise, and kingdoms fall. Foreign empires arrive with their own gods, their own books, their own weapons. Yet the spirit of Africa does not die. It transforms. It hides. It resurfaces in ways unseen. This is the story of how African beliefs shaped kingdoms, how they were challenged by foreign powers, and how they live on today. In Africa, to rule was to embody the divine. In Egypt, the pharaoh was not just a man, he was Horus, son of Ra. His duty was to uphold Ma'at, the balance of the cosmos. Every war, every harvest, every law was framed as a divine duty. In Mali, the emperor was seen as chosen by heaven. When Sundiata Keita rose to power, the griots told his story not as politics, but as prophecy. His victories were guided by destiny and the blessings of the ancestors. In Benin, the Oba was the heartbeat of the kingdom. Altars in the palace connected him to past rulers, and through rituals, he maintained harmony between the living and the dead. In Ethiopia, kings traced their lineage back to the union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Their throne was divine inheritance. Churches carved into stone, like at Lalibela, became physical proof of their spiritual mandate. In the Zulu kingdom, Shaka Zulu's rise was tied to ancestral strength. Every war dance, every ritual before battle, invoked the spirits of those who had fought before. Across Africa, kingdoms rose not by sword alone, but by spiritual legitimacy. Why did these civilizations pour so much into ritual and belief? Because power was fragile. A king who lost the blessing of the gods could lose his throne. A people who ignored the ancestors risked famine, drought, or invasion. The priests of Amun in Nubia could decide who would be king. The Yoruba Ifa oracle guided leaders before war or governance. The rainmakers of the Zulu could ensure crops, or bring starvation. Religion was not separate from politics. It was politics. This made Africa unique, where in many places rulers and priests were rivals. In Africa they were often one and the same. But then, the world shifted. First came Islam. By the 7th century, Muslim traders crossed the Sahara. Kingdoms like Mali, Songhai, and Kanem-Bornu embraced Islam, not as a rejection of their traditions, but as a way to connect with the wider world. Mosques rose in Timbuktu and Gao, but African kings often continued their traditional rituals in secret. Then came Christianity. It had reached Ethiopia as early as the 4th century, making the Kingdom of Axum one of the first Christian states in the world. But in the 15th century, the Portuguese brought Catholicism to West Africa. Later, missionaries spread across the continent, teaching their faith while condemning African traditions as pagan or evil. Finally came colonization. With guns, Bibles, and flags, European empires sought not only to rule Africa's lands but also its soul. Shrines were destroyed, rituals forbidden, priests branded as witches. The drumbeat of the ancestors was silenced in public, but never in private. But Africa's spirit was not so easily killed. When enslaved Africans were carried across the Atlantic, they carried their gods with them. In Haiti, Vodou emerged, blending African spirits with Catholic saints. In Brazil, Candomblé preserved Yoruba orishas under new names. In Cuba, Santeria kept alive the worship of Shango, Oshun, and Elegua. Even in the Americas, where chains tried to erase them, Africa's gods found ways to survive. Back in Africa, traditions adapted. In Nigeria, Christianity and Islam spread, but shrines to the orishas remained hidden in forests. In Ghana, festivals like Homowo and Abokie continued, honoring ancestral spirits. In South Africa, Sangoma still called on the ancestors in healing rituals. The gods of Africa did not die. They simply changed form. Even where rituals faded, the stories remained. The griots of Mali still sing of Sundiata. The Dogon still tell of the Nomo from the stars. The Yoruba still recount how Obatala created the earth with sand and a rooster. The Zulu still tell of Shaka, who listened to the whispers of the ancestors. These myths are not just tales. They are memory maps, reminders of who Africans were before colonization, before the slave trade, before borders were drawn by foreign hands. And today, something remarkable is happening. Across Africa and the diaspora, young people are rediscovering their traditions. Shrines once hidden are being restored. Festivals grow larger each year. Books, films, and music retell the old myths with new voices. Afrofuturism in art and film, like Black Panther, draws directly from these ancient traditions, reimagining Africa not as a land of loss, but as a land of eternal spirit. In Nigeria, the annual Oshun-Osogbo festival draws pilgrims from across the world. In Benin, the Vodun festival reclaims what colonizers tried to erase. In South Africa, ancestral rituals are returning among the youth. The gods are speaking again. So what is the legacy? What do Africa's ancient beliefs teach us today? They teach us that life is sacred. That the earth is not a resource to exploit, but a mother to honor. That ancestors are not gone, but with us always. That power without spiritual legitimacy is fragile. That identity cannot be erased, only transformed. The world today faces division, climate change, and disconnection. But Africa's old ways whisper a reminder. We are not separate from the world. We are part of a living, spiritual thread. Africa's civilizations may rise and fall. Empires may come and go. But the spirit of Africa endures. In every drumbeat. In every story told by the fire. In every offering left at a shrine. And in every heartbeat of those who remember. The gods of Africa are not forgotten. They live, in the land, in the people, and in the future.